left my BF for another man. He even warned me, but I didn't listen. But then he showed his real side. Sometimes we tend to do things our own way because we want to prove that we can do this the way we want to and the way we feel like. He had addressed the issue of me always going out at night, and I ignored him. My mind was made up. I didn't want to miss out. I had some sort of FOMO, fear of missing out in me. I felt like if I listened to my boyfriend, I would miss out on a good time. Instead of listening to him, I listened to my friends, and now look at what that has got me. How I wish I listened to my boyfriend and not my friends. When I was left alone, when I found him gone, where were the friends that I had listened to? They were long gone also, and I was left all alone, licking my own wounds. I wish I had done differently. Maybe if I had listened for once and obeyed. I wouldn't have found myself in a tough situation that left me confused and depressed. I almost lost myself that time, and I don't want the past to repeat itself. A lot happened, and some got hurt in the process. My name is Nia Reddy, female 24, and my boyfriend is Neo Margot, male 26. Neo and I met through a mutual friend, while my girls and I had gone to one of our male friends' birthday party celebrations in Washington. Neo was Liam's male friend childhood bestie. We didn't know about him up until the day of the party. Neo is a very handsome guy, smart, neat, and sophisticated. He was a fun person. You wouldn't get bored when you were chilling with him. He's very cool, calm, and carefree. But he was also a very short-tempered person. 3 months later, Neo and I started dating. We just couldn't keep our feelings in the closet anymore, so we both confessed our true feelings. Our relationship had its share of ups and downs, but we managed to pull through everything through trust and communication. Our relationship was a bliss. We did everything together. We would sometimes go out together to have some fun alone. He allowed me to be free and to be myself. My love for Neo grew fonder and fonder. I had found a best friend, an advisor, and a lover in him. He was my perfect, imperfect situation. Though he had a tendency of going out whenever he got angry or things didn't go the way he was expecting them or the way he wanted to. Another thing about Neo was that he cannot handle or cope well under pressure, especially if it's relationship pressure. He prefers walking out and coming back when the situation is handleable. We dated for 2 years, but during our 1.5 years, things started changing. Neo became distant. He would sometimes come back from wherever he was coming from, moody and uninterested. Mind you, that time I moved in with him on our 6th month of dating. He actually begged me to move in with him because he felt like his apartment was lonely and cold without a female figure. After the whole month of convincing and begging he did, I finally gave in and accepted his request. I was in love with the guy, so I thought, why not accept his request? So I remember one day when Neo's birthday. I had planned to make a nice, intimate, and romantic dinner for him while I would surprise him with my sexy number that I had bought specially for his birthday. I had cooked. When I say I cooked, I went all out, made all his favorites. I even lit the candles and did those romantic decor things. I made it like a romantic and intimate picnic kind of thing. I waited for Neo that day. I even tried calling him, but he was not answering. In fact, he had switched off his phone when I tried to call him for the 3rd time. From there, I saw that he was somehow ignoring me or avoiding me. I asked myself what was happening with him and asked if I had done something wrong because the way he was acting made me think that maybe I had done something wrong, but I was not aware. I stayed the whole night that time and even dozed off on the couch. The surprise was ruined. The birthday romantic intimate picnic was ruined. He stood me up, which was something he had never done before. I was so disappointed and heartbroken by what he had done. He actually came back the following day later. I didn't even know what to say nor do to him because I was so disappointed. I had wasted all my time and energy for him to make his birthday kind of special. Only for him to stand me up like that was the worst part. To ignore my calls, not just ignoring, but he literally switched off his phone when he saw that I was blowing his phone up. In my mind, I had thought that maybe I was a nuisance to him. Maybe I was no longer the girl that he had fallen in love with. Maybe he was not finding me interesting anymore. All those thoughts kept lingering in my mind. They came rushing like a flood, and whenever they did, I would get crushed. My heart would be torn into tiny pieces. I didn't know if I was going in or going out in Neo's life. A lot was no longer promising, and I was actually waiting for anything to happen between us. I tried being patient with him. I tried addressing the issue with him, and he told me that there was nothing wrong between us. He told me that he was dealing with some work pressure. He apologized for the way he had been behaving and promised to change for the better. As much as I did not believe what he was saying, his apology sounded sincere, so I gave him the benefit of the doubt. I wanted him to prove himself without me going after him like he was a herded cow. A few days passed, and he didn't change his behavior. Instead, it got worse to a point that we even argued. There's this one time when I was asking him if he no longer feels me or no longer finds me interesting. He asked why I was asking him that. So I told him all the reasons that I thought he wanted to know so he would know his mistakes and rectify them. Instead of him to keep calm and speak with me in a civilized manner, he decided to just burst out. I was so confused by the sudden burst out, so I asked why he was being defensive because I was asking questions, and he had to give me simple answers. The argument went on and on until it reached the peak point where it got heated, and he decided to just walk out on me and go wherever he was going. I was left there shuddered. I missed my friends. Somehow I was starting to regret ever getting into a relationship with Neo because he had no backbone. He didn't know how to stand up for his sh*t, and it was somehow pissing me off and turning me off. One weekend, a friend of mine hosted a party, and that was where I met him, the man I cheated with. He was charming and handsome. He introduced himself as Rick Jody, male, 27. He was really funny, and he knew how to make a person forget their problems. From that moment we met, there was undeniable chemistry between us. He made me forget that I had a very huge and depressing problem in my house. My boyfriend was depressing me to a point that I was sleeping with wine every night. Rick and I talked for hours, and I felt more alive than I had ever been in years. Rick was attentive and complimentary, showering me with affection. He understood a woman's needs and desires, he made me feel like I was a woman again and that I was not the problem. It was a lot, and I was drowning. As we were talking and laughing, Rick started telling me sweet things that would make any woman melt, but then I remembered that I was actually a taken woman. We spoke more about ourselves. I even mentioned the problems I was facing in my relationship. He was kind and understanding, and he listened to me without judgment. He offered me a shoulder to cry on and a sympathetic ear, something that Neo had failed to do. Over time, Rick and I became close friends, and I found myself confiding in him more and more. He was always there for me, and he made me feel seen and heard in a way that Neo had not for years. So we started hanging out as friends, of course. As the months passed, my friendship with Rick grew stronger, and we started to develop feelings for each other. We began an affair, and I found myself feeling alive and desired for the first time in ages. He had that dopamine over me that I was missing, and every moment with him was magical. I loved my boyfriend, but this newfound excitement and admiration was intoxicating. I knew I shouldn't have done this, but the thrill of being desired by someone new was hard to resist. It felt like I was living in another dimension, It was really refreshing. The way Neo didn't pay attention to me, he didn't even notice what was happening in front of his eyes. I had thought he was going to notice some changes in me or the way I was always out. I was no longer spending much time in the house, especially during weekends. I was always out with either Rich or by myself. That was how ignorant he was. I would always wonder what was happening in his head, but I got tired of being concerned. It was really hurting me that my boyfriend was treating me the way he was treating me. We became more like housemates who share a bedroom and not people in a relationship. I needed his time, attention, and affection, but he was too busy for that. I once had thoughts of him cheating on me or performing adultery on our relationship because of the way he was acting. What was hurting the most was that someone else was giving me the attention I had always longed for, the time I needed and affection, and it was not my boyfriend. Rick was giving me an adrenaline rush, and he was making me happy. Putting a smile on my face and thinking about him would make me giggle. I don't even remember when was the last time I had felt like that. I was sure that even my soul had a dust of sorrows because I was no longer happy with my boyfriend. Rick had that effect on me that I couldn't even explain, but it was there. Sometimes when my day wasn't a great day, if he didn't call or if I didn't see him at our secret spot, he surely knew what I've been missing. Was I too attached to Rick? Well, I think I was. But another thing, he knew how to explore a woman's body, that I can give him a 10 out of 10. He took me from the apartment to another planet. I felt like I was floating in clouds. That's how much I was enjoying the way he was exploring my body. I loved every moment of it. Besides the kissing skills, the guy had great body exploration skills and good intimate drive. He made me reach my climax within a few minutes, and I don't know how many times I had climaxed. That's how good it was. Months passed, I was still head over heels with the man named Rick. I was untouchable. I didn't even listen to my boyfriend when he tried to warn me about my affair partner. I was too deep in it. Even when my boyfriend tried talking to me, I decided to just end our relationship because I thought he wanted to control me and how I lived my life. I turned my back on the man who truly loved me for me, not knowing that I had dug my own grave. I was a fool, right? I was what they called a gone girl. I didn't need anyone's validation or permission to be with my affair partner. I tried asking him about who he really was because we had never gone into a deeper conversation about our lives and future goals. I mean, Neo's warnings were stuck in my head, but I decided to push them back because of the great intimacy that I get from Rick. The only answer he gave me was, "You don't want to know the real me, but you will find out when the time is right." I didn't understand why he would say that because he knew everything about my life, my relationship with Neo and my family and I. But I knew nothing about his family. When I asked him about it, he told me to stop worrying about things that do not concern me and continue being a good partner, not his mother or lawyer in a courtroom. I let everything slide and moved on from it and continued doing my AP duties. People kept giving me warnings about how bad and dangerous my man was, but I didn't bother myself to listen to them. I thought people were just jealous of my newfound satisfaction and happiness. A few months later, I got pregnant, after we had found out that I was expecting his firstborn child. Guess what he said? He bluntly told me to get rid of the pregnancy because he was not ready for a child, and if I keep it, our affair would be over. I mean, I saw another side of Rick that I didn't even know or wouldn't think it existed. He changed from being the sweetest, romantic, and loving guy to being a whole new formed monster that I can't even describe. Mind you, that time I was just in too deep with the guy. I had even sacrificed my relationship for him. I listened to him and I got rid of the pregnancy even though my conscience was not at ease. Guilt was killing me. I felt like I had committed a deadly sin. Things were no longer the same anymore. It was like I had found Neo 2.0. I once confronted him about his bad behavior and absence. He actually confessed that he had a fiancée that was pregnant and he wouldn't let me destroy his relationship with his fiancée just like I had destroyed mine with Neo. I thought he was drunk, but not everything he spitted. He meant every word because he was sober as a judge. I thought he was joking or he would tell me that he was just pulling my leg, but instead he just left the house after he had spit nonsense to me. He came back the following day and acted like everything was fine. He didn't even bother apologizing. The foolish and naive me forgave him even though I didn't get any apology, but I couldn't stay angry at him. I mean, he was my source of happiness. I thought maybe he was under work pressure, that's why he said what he had said. I couldn't stay angry at him. I loved him, and I trusted him. I know that it was so foolish of me, but I couldn't help it. The guy was giving me so much satisfaction in the bedroom department. That time I missed my ex, Neo, so much I had no one to talk to about what I was facing. I was all alone. The guy was controlling, but I didn't see that because I was caught up in the nest of love and intimacy. I ignored all the signs and red flags that he was showing. I should have acted earlier and left him. I remember this one time when he came back home drunk. He found me on a call with a lady that I was working with at the call center before I resigned. He grabbed my phone and smashed it on the wall. I was confused and scared by his outburst. I couldn't understand why he would snatch my phone and throw it on the wall without saying anything. Do you think I should have left or be patient with him because I loved the man? I mean, I loved what he was offering more. What do you think I should have done? Things escalated to a point where he slapped me. I couldn't believe it. He had said some horrible things to me, but he had never laid a hand on me. That whole week I was not okay, emotionally, physically, and spiritually. I should have left that day when he slapped me. He accused me of cheating, saying that I had the nerve to talk to another man when I saw him coming in. He was just a controlling minister with bipolar symptoms. Rick turned out to be like the winter weather. You wouldn't understand him because one minute he was hot and everyone would be happy, and another minute he would be cold as ice. A month passed, he was coming back home, and I was still doing my girlfriend duties. The mistreatment had stopped, or must I say had taken a break, because the only thing he came home for was the food I had cooked for him and sleeping with me. I think he was spending more time with his pregnant fiancée. I was more like a booty call and a maid to him. So one weekend he did something unexpected and shocking. He came home late that night. I had already fallen asleep. I heard noises coming from another room since the apartment was a 3-room apartment. I woke up to check where the noise was coming and to find out that the sounds were coming from the guest room. I opened it to check who was in the room. When I got in, I found him making love to some woman. Can you believe it? He had a pregnant fiancée and I was his girlfriend or AP, but he was busy with other women while I was in the same apartment. I felt really disrespected. I didn't know what to do. I was shocked, shuddered, and heartbroken to a point that I hysterically cried. I left the room immediately after he heard that I was in the room. The buster didn't even bother to follow me. I thought about what the prophet that I had bumped into at the mall the previous day had told me, but I couldn't leave him without a fight. That was when I thought of revenge. I wanted to make him jealous so maybe he would recognize his mistakes and come back to me. I really missed Neo as much as he wasn't perfect, but he was way better than what I had put myself into. I cried till I had no tears left in me. I became bitter, angry, and out for blood. I wanted him to feel the pain he had put me through. I wanted him to get a taste of his own medicine. So I continued being a good submissive affair partner. I was the biggest fool of them all, but I was a shame in a women's generation. I know that, but what would I have done? What would you do if you were in my shoes? There was this day when I decided to be indoors and be a good partner to Rich, so he came back very early that day. And he was on the phone speaking to whoever he was speaking to. I didn't know what he was planning, but I heard him confirming some plans. After he was done with his call, he told me to get ready. We were going out and I should look beautiful. A fool would think he was slowly coming back, but he had planned the worst thing that would change your life. I went with the flow and prepared for the night ahead. I wore the dress that I had bought, hoping to fix things with him. I wanted to surprise him with his favorite dinner, but that didn't happen. The night came, Rick was just in a happy mood that made me suspicious because he hadn't been happy, well, around me. When we got to this private location, there were a lot of people. I knew some of them from his birthday braai. All eyes were on me, some were looking at me with shame or pity. The night on very well until he asked the DJ to stop the music, which got me more confused because I didn't know why I was invited to a party that I didn't know about and what was he going to say since he stopped the music. He started by introducing me as his worst mistake and apologized to the woman that was sitting not far from him. He then went on with his speech. What shocked me to a core was when he called some lady in front, he started by thanking her. I didn't know what was going on, and it seemed like I was the only one in the dark. As I was confused about what was going on, I saw him getting down on his knees, asking for forgiveness and telling her that he wasn't perfect, but he was willing to make all her moments perfect along with their unborn child. I then realized that the lady that was sitting in front was actually his fiancée that he once told me about. My knees got weak in an instant, mind you. I came with him to the party. I had no way to go. So I remained in the proposal remaking party of my affair partner Rick and his woman. I couldn't take it anymore, so I went outside to catch my breath. One of his friends came to me and asked if I was okay. The only thing I did was crying my eyes out. I started having flashbacks of the day when he told me that he had a fiancée, and the lady was more respectful and respected herself than I was. I had been ignoring her ex-boyfriend Neo's warnings about my affair partner Rick for weeks when we were still together and even when I had ended things with Neo. Neo had told me that Rick was not the man I thought he was, that he was reckless and irresponsible, but I wouldn't listen. I was too caught up in the excitement of the affair, the thrill of sneaking around, and the attention Rick gave me. But on a typical Wednesday morning, my phone rang, breaking the silence of my daily routine. I answered, expecting it to be Neo or maybe a telemarketer, but instead, a solemn voice introduced herself as Nurse Jenkins from St. Michael's Hospital. "Nia, I'm calling about Rick. He's been in a serious accident and is in critical condition. He's asking for you." My world just stopped. I felt like I had been punched in the gut. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't think. All I could do was repeat the nurse's words in my head, trying to make sense of them. How did it happen? Finally, I managed to stammer. "There was a car accident. He suffered severe injuries and needs immediate surgery. We need you to come to the hospital as soon as possible." As much as Rick had done me wrong in the worst way possible, but my feelings for him were still there. I still cared. I felt like I was living in a nightmare. I couldn't believe this was happening. I had been so blind, so stupid, ignoring Neo's warnings, ignoring my own doubts. I then rushed to the hospital, my heart racing, my mind racing. When I arrived, I was met with the sight of Rick lying in a hospital bed, machines beeping around him, tubes snaking out of his body. Nurse Jenkins approached me, her expression sympathetic. "Nia, Rick needs surgery, but there's a chance he might not make it. He's asking for you, but you need to be prepared for the worst." I felt like my world was crashing down around me. I had been so foolish, so reckless, ignoring the warnings, ignoring my own heart. I mean, this person had a fiancé and a baby on the way. Why didn't they call her instead of me? Now I might lose the man I had risked everything for. As I stood there, holding Rick's hand, praying for a miracle, I couldn't help but think of Neo and the warnings I had ignored. If only I had listened. If only I had been stronger. If only I had been patient with Neo and tried to work on our relationship instead of going outside our relationship just because of mere intimacy satisfaction. A few days passed and I was in the apartment going through the omnibus of my favorite telenovela called Elite on Netflix when I heard a knock, and it was police officers. They were looking for my AP, Rick. I told them that he was at the St. Michael's Hospital and he was no longer living in the apartment. They asked me to notify them when he gets better, but they will also go and pay him a visit. My ex-lover who cared about me had warned me about Rick, but I didn't listen, and the karma was catching on me. One lazy day, I got a call from Bianca, one of my former co-workers and a friend, telling me to check my social media. When I asked why I must do that, she told me to find out for myself. At that time, I was in the middle of starting my own clothing boutique business and trying to get sponsors. So I logged on, and the first thing that I saw was a video, and most people that I was following were sharing and commenting about it. I opened the video, and to my surprise, it was a video of Rick and I being intimate and a picture of his pregnant fiancée. My tongue got dry in an instant. I also saw that the person who had posted the video was Neo Margot, my so-called ex-boyfriend. I felt like I was losing breath, so I called Bianca and asked her to come to my apartment. My heart was beating abnormally, and the next thing I don't remember what happened because I woke in the hospital bed, with drips and oxygen covering my mouth. The meaning of his name became a true meaning. He was my lesson, the one I'll never forget about. The video was the first thing that came back to my mind when I woke up. I felt like I was suffocating. I had just started fixing my life, and the person I once loved destroyed my life. I lost the sponsor that I had got. I lost customers. My life was no longer the same. I wanted to just end myself. My father came to see me, after everything I had said to them when they told me to be careful and that I should make sure to not lose something that is there for some satisfaction. I was ashamed to look at him, but he took me back home. Even though things were no longer the same as before, I was willing to work on my relationship with my family. I thought I was just making Neo pay for hurting me and my feelings when he changed on me. Mind you, that time I was even thinking of asking for forgiveness for not taking his warning seriously. I had hoped that Neo and I would still fix things, but instead he left me and destroyed my life. As the weeks went by, his condition slowly began to improve. It was a long and arduous road to recovery, but he fought with a resilience that left me in awe. And as I stood by his side, offering him my unwavering support, I knew that this experience had changed me in ways I never could have anticipated. I made a vow to myself that day, a vow to never again ignore the warnings of those who cared about me, to never again let my impulses cloud my judgment. I had learned a harsh lesson in the consequences of my actions, and I was determined to ensure that nothing like this would ever happen again. Slowly but surely, as Rick regained his strength and began to piece his life back together, we both came to terms with the reality of our affair. It was a fleeting moment of passion that had spiraled into a life-altering event, one that had left us both scarred but ultimately wiser. And as we said our goodbyes, our paths diverging once more, I knew that this chapter in my life had come to a close. I had ignored his warning, and it had almost cost me everything. But through the pain and heartache, I had emerged stronger, more self-aware than ever before. As I walked away from the hospital, the weight of my past mistakes lifting from my shoulders, I knew that I would carry this experience with me always. It had been a harsh awakening, a brutal lesson in the consequences of impulsive decisions. But it had also been a catalyst for growth, a reminder of the power of redemption and the resilience of the human spirit. And for that, I would be forever grateful. A few days later, 2 cops came back home and asked to speak to me. I had thought that maybe they had come to deliver some news. I don't know why I was thinking that they were going to deliver some news. Little did I know that the cops were actually not coming to deliver any news, but they were there to make an arrest. Mind you that time neighbors were watching, some whispering among themselves, some were taking videos. The cop that I couldn't recall his surname told me that I was arrested for fraud and corruption that I had done along with Mr. Rick Jody. You know when you are extremely shocked, to a point that even your body just freezes, mind goes blank, eyes stop blinking, mouth hanging. That was how I was when the cop told me that they were there to arrest me. Everything went back to normal when the other cop was handcuffing me. I couldn't understand. I asked myself, why would they accuse me of such? That part really ripped me apart. My world came crumbling down, hopes gone. 1 month later, I got out, but when I got out, I felt like I was just a walking zombie. My soul had died the moment I was thrown in that holding cell with other inmates like I was a thief. The judge released me on bail, and to tell the truth, I don't even know who paid for my bail. I tried asking, but I was never given any answer, while on another hand, Rick was denied bail. I didn't know that I was involved with the corruption and fraud of a businessman. I missed Neo so much, and I had realized that being away from him made me feel incomplete. As much as he had destroyed my life like he did, but I miss him and how our relationship was. My life was just F*********** D up. Neo had managed to ruin my life just because of an affair that I had with Rick and for ignoring his warnings. On another hand, my friend Bianca just ghosted me and went AWOL. I had no one to vent to or ask help from. I was officially alone, broke and empty. I just didn't know how to recover from the whole thing. Neo had hammered the last nail in my life. He had completely destroyed me, and I had not come back from it. I didn't even have anything under my name besides my driver's license and identity document. Time passed. I even changed my phone number, blocked Neo on social media, and cut off all contact with everyone except for my family. It was a difficult decision, but one that I knew was necessary for my own mental health. In the weeks that followed, I focused on healing myself. I went to therapy, joined a support group for survivors of emotional abuse and being arrested, and slowly began to rebuild my life. It wasn't easy. There were days when I couldn't get out of bed, nights when I couldn't sleep. But I pushed through, determined to come out the other side stronger than before. One of the biggest hurdles I faced were coming to terms with my own role in the relationship. I had ignored the warning signs, turned a blind eye to the red flags, and allowed myself to be manipulated and controlled. It was a hard truth to face, but one that I knew I had to confront in order to move forward. Through therapy and self-reflection, I began to understand why I had stayed in the relationship for so long. I realized that I had been seeking validation and love and satisfaction from someone else instead of finding it within myself. I learned to set boundaries, to prioritize my own needs and desires, and to say no to anyone who didn't respect them. As time went on, I started to feel like myself again. I rediscovered my passions, my interests, and my sense of self-worth. I laughed more, smiled more, and felt a sense of freedom that I hadn't experienced in years. And then one day I ran into my affair partner, Rick, with his fiancée and a child, the one who had inadvertently sparked the end of my relationship with Neo. We struck up a conversation, and I found myself opening up to him in a way that I hadn't been able to before. We spoke a lot after his fiancée had excused herself and told Rick that she would find him in a certain restaurant. I was happy at the fact that I got a chance to iron things out with Rick and to ask him why he had involved me in his shenanigans because I was innocent. He explained what happened and I understood. I was arrested because I was involved with him or had an affair with him, not because I was actually involved in fraud with him. He then said that the case was closed because they didn't have enough evidence to keep him in prison. I can proudly say that I am proud of the woman I had become, and I really appreciated that Rick took his time and explained everything to me, and even apologized for the heartache and stress he had caused. I am now living my best life, but I still need some clarifications from Neo. Can you give me any advices? Hey Reddit, I've wanted to post this for a while now, but it took me a while until I actually got strong enough to talk about it. Things are still in the works, that is, the divorce is still in the works, but I felt like talking about it would make me feel better. I'm here to talk about my trauma today, Reddit. I made a very huge mistake. I got drunk even when I knew that I could not handle my alcohol, and then I slept with random strangers from the club. Of course, my husband found out. My name is Kim, and my husband's name, or should I say ex-husband's name, is Richard. Richard and I have been married for about 2 years now, but we've been together for a very long time. We met in high school and started dating almost immediately. Senior year of high school, to be precise. Richard was very, very popular. Everyone liked him. He was captain of the football team and was an all-general, very fun person to be around, plus he was also from a wealthy family, which meant a lot of people wanted to hang out with him. I was quite the opposite, see, even though I could be quite friendly and nice. I was very quiet and hence I didn't have a lot of friends. Even now at adulthood, I still don't really have a lot of friends as I never developed any long-lasting friendships, both in college and in high school, due to my shyness and inability to approach others. So back then when Richard approached me, showed an interest in me and wanted to be my friend, I was excited. He was my first friend ever. I'm 30 years old and Richard is 31. We've been through a lot together, but nothing compares to the mess I made with my drunken escapade. Now I'm here to share my story, hoping that someone out there can learn from my mistakes or maybe offer some advice on how to navigate through this mess I've created. So here it goes, I guess. Richard's perspective on marriage was always quite different from mine. He thought it was just a fancy piece of paper that didn't change much about our relationship. He never saw it as a necessity, more like an optional formality. For him, our love was what mattered, not a legal document. I, on the other hand, had dreamed of a grand wedding since I was a little girl. I wanted to wear a white dress, say my vows, and all the festivities surrounding it. It was more than just a piece of paper. For me, it was about celebrating our love with our families and friends. Another one of the reasons I pushed for marriage was our son. He was 5 years old at the time, and I wanted him to witness our union officially. I didn't want him growing up questioning why mommy and daddy weren't legally married. It was important for me that he saw us as a complete family unit. Richard initially wasn't keen on the idea. He believed in our commitment to each other without the need for a marriage certificate. He was content with our engagement and our life together. It took some convincing, but eventually he understood how much it meant to me. He came around and agreed to tie the knot, not because he saw marriage the same way I did, but because he loved me and wanted to make me happy. Our wedding was a beautiful affair, though Richard wasn't heavily involved in the planning. It was my dream, so I took charge of most aspects. His family, however, had mixed feelings about it. They were polite but distant, not exactly warm or welcoming. They were nice enough, but you could tell they weren't jumping for joy about our marriage. I knew that they didn't fully approve of me, maybe because I came from a middle-class background while they were more affluent, and no matter how much I tried to, they politely shunned all my attempts to build a relationship with them. During the wedding planning, Richard's parents started to subtly suggest a prenuptial agreement. They framed it as a precaution, but of course I couldn't help but feel a bit judged. It felt like they were questioning my intentions. Signing it felt like my own way of proving my intentions were genuine, that I wasn't after Richard's wealth. At that time, I was willing to do anything to gain their approval, even if it meant signing a document that could potentially complicate things later on. I agreed to it because I thought it would show I was serious about Richard and not his wallet. Looking back now, I see how silly it was to think signing a piece of paper would change their minds about me. But back then, I was eager to fit in and prove myself. Now, with the divorce looming and that prenup staring me in the face, I realized that I might have made a huge mistake. Richard and I had a rock-solid relationship based on respect, trust, and honest conversations. From our dating days to our married life, Richard and I were on the same page about communication and effort in our relationship. We were mature enough to handle disagreements without letting them spiral out of control. Talking things out was very crucial for us. We didn't hide anything from each other and always shared our thoughts and feelings openly. Decision-making was a joint effort. We made sure to consult each other on important matters and considered each other's opinions unless it was something minor we knew wouldn't bother the other. We understood that nurturing a relationship meant being romantic and thoughtful, like planning dates, movie nights, and special evenings together. Richard often put in more effort than me, but I did my best too. Things took a turn when Richard's dad started talking about retirement. Their family business was more than just successful. It was Richard's heritage, a legacy he was expected to carry forward as the only child, and that meant the responsibility of running the company fell squarely on his shoulders. The pressure was intense, and Richard's workload skyrocketed as he took on more projects and responsibilities. The transition wasn't smooth. Richard's dad seemed eager to pass on responsibilities quickly, perhaps too quickly. It felt like he couldn't wait to be done with the CEO role. As a result, Richard found himself buried under a mountain of projects and decisions, and they were each demanding his immediate attention. He was always busy with meetings, strategy sessions, and overseeing various aspects of the business. This shift in dynamics hit me hard. As a stay-at-home mom, Richard was not only my husband, but also my main companion and only close friend. With his new responsibilities, our time together became scarce. We no longer had movie nights or random outings, and they were all replaced by late-night meetings and early morning calls. The busyness also took a toll on Richard. He seemed constantly stressed and preoccupied. I was now managing our son and household responsibilities largely on my own, which was a significant adjustment since previously Richard was very hands-on in the house. He took on a lot of chores and would always help. Our son was also more of a daddy's boy and was very attached to Richard. I understood the pressure Richard was under. He had to balance family expectations, business demands, and his personal life. But it was tough for me. I missed our long conversations, our laughter, and the simple joy of spending uninterrupted time together. The lack of time together was beginning to strain our connection. All we ever talked about now were schedules and responsibilities. Despite the challenges, of course, I tried to support Richard in every way I could. I took on more responsibilities at home to ease his workload. I encouraged him when he felt overwhelmed and celebrated his successes. Richard wasn't blind to the strain our relationship was under. He saw how much things had changed and how distant we had become. He was genuinely sorry, and he made sure to express it repeatedly. He assured me that once this stressful and hectic transition period at work was over, and he settled into his new role, he would prioritize spending more quality time with us at home. His intentions were sincere. He didn't want our son to feel neglected, so every spare moment he had was dedicated to our little family, no matter how short those moments were. We tried to make those moments count, but deep down I was feeling more and more isolated. Even though Richard was doing his best, I couldn't shake off this heavy loneliness. I felt exhausted, both physically and emotionally, from shouldering most of the household responsibilities while he was wrapped up in work. His constant apologies and pledges to change helped a bit, but they didn't fill the void of not having someone to talk to, laugh with, or share daily life experiences. As Richard settled into his new role at work and became more present at home, There was this noticeable shift in our dynamic. We couldn't help but feel a bit resentful towards his father for the chaos we had to endure during the transition. Richard had never really been given the chance to dive deep into the company's operations or learn the ropes from his father. So when the time came for him to take charge, it was like diving into deep waters without a life jacket. Despite the strained atmosphere lingering between us, Richard made an effort to bridge the gap. He suggested taking a vacation during the upcoming holidays. He also suggested leaving our son with his mom, who was more than happy to spend time with her grandson. Richard proposed a week-long getaway to a place of my choice, and he emphasized that it would be a great way for us to reconnect and unwind from the stresses of daily life. He mentioned that the holiday timing would be perfect since our son wouldn't miss school, and my mother-in-law wouldn't have to worry about dropping him off. It was a very thoughtful gesture, considering the recent changes in our lives, especially since Richard's parents, who said they felt they were getting older, downsized, and moved to a smaller house farther away from us. The idea of a vacation sounded appealing. I felt like it would be a chance to escape the tension that had been building up and find some much-needed peace and intimacy. It felt like a step towards rebuilding our connection and leaving the past frustrations behind us. But the thing is, if I had known what would go down, I would have never gone on that vacation. Hawaii had always been on my bucket list. I'd heard so many amazing things about it, from the stunning beaches to the vibrant culture. So when the holidays rolled around and Richard suggested we go on a vacation to anywhere I wanted, I was beyond excited. We dropped off our son with my in-laws, who were more than happy to have him, and then we jetted off to Hawaii for what we hoped would be a much-needed break. We landed in Hawaii to warm breezes and the sweet scent of tropical flowers, and it instantly put us in vacation mode. Our accommodation was right by the beach, and it had a stunning view and easy access to the ocean. The first few days we spent exploring the island, trying out local delicacies and simply enjoying each other's company. We took leisurely walks along the beach, watched the mesmerizing sunset, sipped tropical drinks and watched the waves, and just soaked in the beauty of our surroundings. As our last day in Hawaii approached, I couldn't shake this itch to hit up a local nightclub. I'd heard amazing things about Hawaii's nightlife and was dying to experience it firsthand. When I brought it up to Richard, he seemed unsure at first. I get it, we'd been joined at the hip throughout the trip. But I was determined, or should I say stubborn. I told Richard I really wanted to check out the club, and he eventually agreed to come along. However, I made it clear that I needed some space to enjoy the night on my terms. So we got dressed, hailed a cab, and headed to the club. Inside, the music was loud, the crowd was lively, and the energy was infectious. I immediately hit the bar and started drinking. I had told Richard I needed space, so he headed off on his own, but I think not too far that he couldn't keep an eye on me, though. I think he eventually stopped watching me. Before we got to the nightclub, Richard had warned me to watch my alcohol intake, as we both knew I was a lightweight. I had agreed at first, but then the moment I got to the nightclub, I hit the bar. It had started with me just wanting one drink, and then I couldn't stop. I totally ignored Richard's advice about drinking responsibly. I kept guzzling drinks at the nightclub, not caring about getting too drunk. It tasted good, and I was having fun, or so I thought. If Richard had stuck around, he would have stopped me from going overboard, but I guess he figured I needed space. As the night went on, I got bolder. I was dancing with strangers, laughing and feeling carefree. Each drink made me feel more alive and daring. It was like I couldn't stop. I was caught up in the party atmosphere. Richard probably gave up trying to keep an eye on me, thinking I needed some time to myself. But looking back, if he had stayed close, maybe I wouldn't have gone overboard like I did. I was so wasted when I hit it off with this guy at the club. Honestly, I can barely recall his face or remember anything substantial about him, though I do know that he must have been attractive. We didn't bother with introductions or exchanging details like names or numbers. It was just a spur-of-the-moment thing fueled by booze. We met on the dance floor, started dancing together, and then headed back to the bar together to get some more drinks after a few minutes of dancing. With each drink, I felt bolder, and the idea of taking this stranger back to my hotel room seemed very appealing. I pitched the idea to him, and surprisingly, he was up for it, and we ditched the club without looking back. The trip back to the hotel is all a fuzzy mess in my mind. I guess he wasn't as wasted as I was, which made things go smoother. We ended up in my hotel room, and things quickly got heated, and we proceeded to have sex. It was a reckless, alcohol-fueled action that I can barely recall. It's all just a jumble of blurry memories. I have no idea when we stopped or even fell asleep. It was all a drunken blur. The morning after, I woke up pretty late and with a pounding head, and the realization of what I'd done slapped me hard right in the face. The stranger had already left, which is something I was thankful for because, to be honest, I didn't even want to even see who I had cheated with. But I was a real mess, both inside and out. The room was a disaster zone, which just perfectly reflected the chaos in my mind. I knew I had to clean up fast. I was hoping against hope that Richard hadn't seen the aftermath of my mistake or that he hadn't walked in on us somehow. My hands were shaking. I frantically tidied up, trying to erase any trace of the stranger's presence. Each moment felt like an eternity as I scrubbed away at the mess on the bedsheet. I was praying for some kind of divine intervention to fix what I had done. Even though I knew Richard could hold his liquor very well, I was hoping Richard had someone gotten very drunk after I left the party and couldn't make his way back to the hotel room, or he left with someone else, because then that would erase the possibility that he walked in on the stranger and I. Then after I was done with cleaning, I decided to call Richard so as to know where he was. I dialed his number with trembling fingers. My heart was racing, but his phone was switched off, which kind of added to my mounting anxiety. What if he had come back and seen everything? The thought made my stomach churn with dread. I continued to hope and pray for a way out of this mess, but if I had found a way out of that mess or avoided it altogether, I wouldn't be here telling you guys my story. Every minute without hearing from Richard made my heart race faster. I kept imagining the worst scenarios. Maybe he had been in some kind of accident. Maybe he had come to the hotel room and found me and the stranger. They were all playing out in my mind like a horror movie. I couldn't also shake off the guilt that maybe my actions had driven him away. Maybe he had actually seen everything, and it made him hate me so much that he didn't even want to talk to me. The fact that his phone was switched off felt like a very deliberate move, a way of shutting me out completely. With each passing hour of silence, my nerves were shot. I tried calling and texting him repeatedly, but there was still no response. It got to a point I was thinking of calling his parents. Looking back now, I realized that my frantic cleaning had blinded me to the obvious signs. If I had taken a moment to really look around the hotel room earlier, maybe I would have picked up on clues about Richard's disappearance. But guilt and shock had clouded my judgment. We were supposed to leave the next day, and Richard was nowhere to be found. I decided to start packing our bags, and that was when I freaked out even more. At this point, I was now trying to hold back tears as I packed. Richard's stuff was nowhere to be found, not a single sock, toothbrush, or shirt in sight. This wasn't some temporary absence. He had deliberately taken everything. Richard had left me in Hawaii. It made my heart ache with regret and fear. I was freaking out, plain and simple. The realization that Richard had left me in Hawaii was very painful. It was a gut punch. I knew that he must have seen what happened between me and the stranger. There was no way he would have walked out on me like this if he hadn't witnessed the betrayal firsthand. How could I have been so reckless, so stupid? I knew I had to start packing. There was no point in staying in Hawaii any longer. I had to go back home and face the music. The thought of facing Richard's disappointment made me feel sick to my stomach. But there was no turning back now. I had to face the music and own up to my mistakes. I hurriedly packed my belongings, booked my flight, and checked out early. I arrived at the airport and I felt like a mess inside. I tried calling Richard again and again, but he just wouldn't pick up. I boarded the plane back home. I couldn't shake off this sinking feeling in my gut. It was a long flight. I was exhausted and had a terrible headache, but let me spare you guys my ramblings. Finally landing, I rushed to our house. I was hoping to find some answers, or at least a familiar face. But the silence when I knocked on the door was deafening. No one answered. Panic started to creep in. I called Richard once more, and this time he picked up. His voice was so distant and cold. He told me to leave, that my things were already at my parents' place. That hit me like a ton of bricks. How and when did he do that? I tried to call his bluff. There was no way he could have moved my things to my parents' place that quick. But he was deathly serious. He told me no one was home, that I was a fool to take a stranger from the club to our hotel room, and then proceed to cheat on him with the stranger. Even when I tried to defend myself by saying I was intoxicated and could barely remember what happened, he said those were excuses, and he warned me about my alcohol intake. I pleaded with him, trying to make him understand, but it was like talking to a wall. He had made up his mind, and there was no changing it. So with a heavy heart, I turned and headed back to my parents' house, feeling like I had hit rock bottom. Everything and everyone seemed to be moving at lightning speed, yet I felt like I was stuck in slow motion. I still didn't fully understand what had happened in my absence, and that left me with a barrage of questions. Why hadn't anyone called me earlier? Did my in-laws know about what happened? How would I see my son now? By the time I arrived at my parents' place, I felt like a complete mess, and seeing the disappointment in my parents' eyes only made it worse, though I couldn't really blame them. When I confronted my parents about not reaching out to me by calling or even texting to tell me Richard had dropped off my stuff, they explained that they knew I would most likely start heading back to the States but didn't know when my flight would land. It was a very flimsy excuse, but I was too overwhelmed to argue. They informed me that Richard had dropped off all my belongings and they were stored in my old room. Hearing this only deepened my shame. They showed me to my old room, which was now filled with boxes packed by Richard. It felt like my life had been condensed into those boxes. It felt like everyone was against me. I tried to explain that I was heavily intoxicated, but my parents echoed Richard's sentiments. Being drunk wasn't an excuse for infidelity. They reminded me that if I couldn't handle alcohol responsibly, then I shouldn't have indulged to that extent. Their disappointment was palpable, adding to the weight of my mistakes. My parents told me what Richard had said about the cheating, and it felt like a slap in the face. I wanted to explain, to make them understand how out of control I was, to tell them how drunk I was, but it didn't matter. They, like Richard, saw it as a choice I made, not a drunken mistake. I felt like I was sinking deeper into shame as I unpacked my things. It was a long night of soul-searching and regret, wondering how I could have messed things up so badly. I spent days just crying my eyes out and begging Richard to forgive me, hoping against hope that somehow things would go back to how they were. I thought about reaching out to Richard's folks, but the thought of facing their smug satisfaction made me hesitate. They were always nice but distant, that kind of polite but distant vibe. My siblings tried to console me, but underneath their words I could feel the blame. It was like everyone saw me as the one who messed everything up. I did everything I could to make Richard see how sorry I was, but he wouldn't budge. He kept reminding me about his warnings and how things could have been different if I hadn't pushed him away that night at the club. Even my parents tried to talk some sense into him, but Richard was like a rock, unmoving. He wants a divorce and isn't going to budge. He keeps telling me that I'll get served soon. It took me a while to even gather the courage to post this on Reddit, hoping for some kind of lifeline or advice. The pain of losing everything I hold dear is something I don't wish on anyone. So to anyone reading this, don't make the same mistakes I did. Don't let a stupid moment of recklessness cost you everything. Treasure what you have, talk things out, and never underestimate the fallout of a bad decision, and for the love of everything that is holy, don't fucking cheating. Update. Hey Reddit, I'm honestly blown away by the response to my post. I never expected it to gain so much attention, especially not in such a short time. I posted it from my main account because I didn't think it would blow up like this, and I honestly didn't think many people I know would see it since they're not big on Reddit. I want to address some of the comments and questions I've been receiving. Firstly, I know there have been some really hurtful comments, especially about me using alcohol as an excuse for cheating. I'm not asking for a free pass. I understand that being drunk doesn't justify my actions. I'm just trying to share my perspective and explain what happened. Regarding my son, a lot of you asked if Richard was keeping him away from me since I mentioned in my post that I was worried about not being able to see him. But when I said that I meant not being able to see him every day, that was more about the uncertainty of custody arrangements rather than Richard keeping me away from him. He's actually been very reasonable about letting me see our son, and I appreciate that. In fact, the only times I've seen Richard physically was when he dropped off our son at my parents' house to spend some time with me. Some of you also pointed out inconsistencies or called the story fake. I want to assure you that this is my reality right now, as painful as it is. If there are any gaps or inconsistencies in my story, it's because I wrote it during a very emotional and difficult time, and I just wanted this as an outlet for how I was feeling. To answer a few common questions, yes, I'm still staying at my parents' place, and the divorce proceedings haven't been finalized yet. Yes, I've suggested therapy, but Richard is only open to it for our son, not for us as a couple. As for financial matters, our joint account is frozen, and I don't have access to it. I can't contest that as it's all Richard's money. And yes, I know I'll need to seek legal advice. I'm going to possibly need financial support from my parents for that. I'm not looking for sympathy or excuses. I know I've made a terrible mistake, and I'm facing the consequences. I just needed a space to share my thoughts and feelings, and I appreciate those of you who have been understanding and supportive. I didn't even think I would be updating it, but I guess here we are. Thanks for reading and for your insights, Reddit. Update. Hey Reddit, I wanted to pop back in and give you all a quick update. So I got served with the divorce papers. It was something I knew was coming, but it hit me hard nonetheless. I couldn't help but cry afterwards. It just made everything feel so real, like Richard was truly done with me because of one mistake I made while I was drunk. On the brighter side, Richard has been more open about letting me see our kid. Our son has been a bit confused by all the changes, so Richard is considering therapy for him. He's even sent me a few options for therapists, which I appreciate. Despite everything, he still involves me in decisions regarding our child. Richard has also explained things to our son in a simple way, assuring him that things won't change too much and that he'll still have both of us, just in different houses. It's a small comfort because I know this must be a very difficult and confusing situation for our kid. As for my family, they've toned down the blame game and are now focusing on supporting me. However, they're also feeling the financial strain since Richard has cut off the financial assistance he used to provide them. We'll have to adjust and make it through somehow. Posting here on Reddit has been a bit therapeutic for me, almost like journaling. It helps me process my thoughts and emotions. Now my next step is to seek legal advice. My parents are advising me not to rush into signing the divorce papers and to explore if I have any stake in our assets, like the house. It's a bit ironic considering I signed a prenup that includes a cheating clause. Unfortunately, my parents aren't aware of this yet, but I'll have to tell them eventually. Thanks for reading and for all your support, and yes, including the horrible comments, Reddit. Update. Hey Reddit, I need to update you on what's happening because I'm feeling incredibly overwhelmed right now. I'm holed up in my room listening to my parents' screaming match, which is definitely fun. If my sarcasm isn't coming through, let me be clear, it's far from fun. So my parents just found out about the prenup, and let's just say they're furious. Furious for several reasons. First, it means I probably won't be getting anything from the divorce thanks to the cheating clause in the prenup. It's a bitter pill to swallow, knowing I won't get a claim on the house, especially when it could have helped us financially. They're also angry that I never told them about the prenup and that I signed it without my own lawyer present. I know it was a massive mistake on my part, but I was trying to impress Richard's parents at the time, who, by the way, haven't reached out to me since this mess began. My parents think I was taken advantage of, and they're consulting their lawyer to see if there's any legal recourse, although deep down, I know the answer is likely no. Why are they screaming? Well, my mom thinks my dad was being too harsh on me. She argues that it was my decision to marry Richard and also my decision to sign the prenup. My mom thinks it shouldn't matter to my dad whether I get anything out of the prenup and that my dad is just being greedy. It turned into a heated argument, and I retreated to my room because it was all too much to handle. On a somewhat brighter note, I'm starting to search for a job. Although, let's be honest, it's not exactly a bright side. I've realized how broke I am. I'm relying entirely on my parents for everything. I can't stay here forever, it's just too much. I'm hoping to move out eventually, even though it'll be tough since I haven't worked in a long time. But I'll figure it out somehow. So that's where things stand. Thanks for reading, Reddit, and thanks for the support, even if it's mixed with some less than kind comments. Update. Hey Reddit, just a quick update to share some news. I landed my first job interview since I started looking. It's been a bit challenging because most places want experienced candidates, but I'm okay starting at minimum wage and working my way up. It's not ideal, and I honestly hate that it's come to this, but I don't have much choice at the moment. It's kind of crazy, you know? One moment I was living in $1 million house, enjoying a wonderful marriage with a supportive husband, and the next I'm back at my parents' place. One moment I'm in Hawaii, and the next I'm back to reality. Life can be incredibly unpredictable and wild sometimes. Sometimes I think I'll wake up and it'll all be a dream. I've been reflecting a lot on the mistakes I've made, and I truly feel guilty about them. That's why I haven't touched a drop of alcohol since everything happened, no matter how tough things have been and no matter how miserable I've been feeling. Thanks for sticking around, Reddit. The harsh comments have eased up a bit, and I appreciate that. It's been a roller coaster, but I'm taking it one step at a time. Thanks again for reading and for all the support. Update. Hey Reddit, I wasn't planning on giving an update until after the divorce proceedings, but I've been getting a lot of questions about what's going on lately, so here's a little peek into my current life, which honestly feels pretty mundane compared to everything that's happened. Firstly, my in-laws are still radio silent. They haven't reached out, and I'm definitely not reaching out to them either. It's pretty clear they never cared for me much, so I'm sure they're happy to be rid of me. Fine by me, honestly. Secondly, my dad did apologize to me. It came a bit late, but he apologized to both me and my mom. I decided to forgive him, especially since he's been quite supportive throughout all of this. On the job front, I didn't get the interview I went for, which was a bit disappointing, but I'm still actively looking. The divorce proceedings are looming closer, but I'd rather not dive into details while it's still ongoing. It's still a painful process, and I don't want to give you all half-hearted updates. Our son is doing well, thank you for asking. We've found a therapist, but the earliest appointment we could get for our son is about a month from now. Once we've had our first session, I'll fill you all in on how it goes. That's about it for now. Life is slowly settling into a routine, though a very different one from what I was used to. Thanks for all your support and questions, Reddit. I'll update again once everything with the divorce is finalized. Update. Hey Reddit, it's me again. I owe you all an update, and I apologize for not doing it sooner. A lot has happened in these past months, or maybe I should say, a little has happened, so let me catch you up quickly. Firstly, the divorce proceedings have finally been finalized. It took longer than I expected, but it's done now. Unfortunately, the cause my parents hoped would invalidate the prenup didn't work out in my favor. I got nothing from the divorce, which I'm sure makes my husband's parents quite happy. I can almost hear them saying, "I told you so," and lecturing my ex-husband about why prenups are essential. The prenup held up well in court, and I ended up with nothing, not even custody of our child. The lack of custody was particularly painful. I wonder if I should have fought harder for it, but without a stable income, the judge deemed it ironic for me to receive custody. The judge's words were quite blunt. She said it would be ironic for me to get custody because then my husband would have to pay me child support, which still wouldn't be enough without a job. On a positive note, my ex-husband graciously declined to take child support from me. I guess he understood my financial situation, which I appreciate. I've managed to secure a job now, which is a relief. It's nothing fancy, just minimum wage and limited hours, but it's a start. Yes, I'm still living with my parents, but I'm saving up to move out. The housing market is tough as there's a housing crisis, so I'll likely need a roommate to afford a place on my own. Things at home have mellowed down a bit. My dad isn't as insufferable as before, and overall things are okay. Our son is in therapy, and it's been beneficial. He's coping better and understanding things more clearly, which is a huge relief. Life has its ups and downs, but I'm grateful for the support I've received, especially from you all on Reddit. This might be my last update, but I wanted to express my gratitude. You've all helped me through a tough time, and I appreciate it immensely. Thank you.